I had never known the desert could howl like a living thing until that night in 1877, when the storm rose up against me as though it meant to finish what my husband had begun. The wind drove sand and rain into my face, each lash of it stinging as sharp as his hand, as cruel as his words. The horse beneath me trembled, lungs wheezing, hooves sinking into the mud. My skirts clung to my legs, soaked through, heavy as chains, and though I had cut the rope that tied me to Harold McCree's house, I could still feel the weight of his grip on my wrist. I had run from him, from the man who claimed me as his wife, but treated me worse than he would a broken mule. And yet his shadow clung tighter than the rain-soaked fabric to my skin. My hands ached from the reins, raw and blistered. I had stolen more than the horse. I had taken a leather pouch with gold coins hidden beneath the floorboards of his study. It was my sin, my salvation, and my sentence, all in one. I knew he would come for me. A man like Harold, swollen with pride and land, and men who answered to him, would never allow a woman to escape with his money in her life. He would track me across the desert until his boots found my bones. I had seen that promise in his eyes, just as I had felt it in the crack of his fists across my face. The storm thickened, turning the sky blacker than a preacher's robe. Lightning tore across it, white and jagged, and in those flashes, I saw ghosts of myself. Clara Dawson, the girl who had once dreamed of playing piano in a parlor, of children chasing chickens in a yard, of laughter unbound by fear. Those dreams had bled out of me one beating at a time, until all that was left was the hollow rattle of my breath and the knowledge that I must either run or die. When the horse stumbled, I nearly pitched forward into the muck. My palms slipped, nails tearing against the leather. I pulled him upright with the last of my strength, whispering hoarsely, "Just a little farther, please, just a little." My voice was swallowed by the storm, thin and useless. I did not know where I was going. I only knew west. West meant away. West meant a chance, slim as it was. Then, through the sheets of rain, I saw it. A pinprick of light flickering steady in the distance. My chest clenched. At first I thought it was a trick, a fevered dream conjured by a desperate mind. But as we crested a rise, I saw it again, a lamp burning in a cabin window, defiant against the storm. My vision blurred with tears and rain. Shelter, if only for a night. If only long enough to breathe. The horse faltered once more. I slid from the saddle, my boots sinking into mud, my knees giving way beneath me. I clutched the saddle horn for balance, but the world tilted. My legs buckled, and I staggered forward. One step, then another, dragging myself toward the light like a moth near its final flicker. My lungs burned, my ribs screamed where Harold's boots had landed last. And still I stumbled on, clutching the pouch of gold to my chest as though it were my heart. When the porch rose before me, I reached for it blindly, my vision tunneling into darkness. The door creaked open just as I collapsed, and the last thing I felt was a pair of arms strong, steady catching me before the ground could. When I came to, it was to the sound of wood popping in a fire and the smell of smoke curling gentle in the air. I was wrapped in something warm, thick, and soft wool. I thought in due, I blinked into the dim glow of lamplight. I did not recognize where I was. My heart lurched. Panic rose sharp and wild in my throat, till I heard a voice, deep, low, measured. A man's voice, yet not Harold's. "Easy now. You're safe." Safe. The word meant nothing to me. I forced my eyes wider, trying to find him. He was seated by the fire, elbows on his knees, watching me not like a man who owned a thing, but like a man who had found a bird with a broken wing and wasn't sure if it would bite. His hair was dark, streaked with the dust of years, his shoulders broad beneath a worn shirt. A scar traced his jaw, pale against his tanned skin, and his eyes blue. Sharp as a winter sky met mine and held steady. "Where am I?" My voice cracked, dry as sandpaper. "My place," he said. "Name's Ethan Walker. Found you near dead on my porch." He leaned forward, resting his forearms against his knees. "You've been out for hours." The wool slipped as I pushed myself up on my elbows. Beneath it, I wore nothing but my shift, and I realized then that my dress was gone. Terror shot through me. I gripped the blanket tighter around me. What did you do?" His gaze didn't waver. "Your clothes were soaked clean through. Would have killed you with fever if I'd left 'im on. I put you by the fire, covered you up. That's all." I searched his face, waiting for the sneer, the smirk, the hunger that always lurked in a man's eyes. But there was none. Just tired patience. He had seen death before, I thought, and he was not about to wrestle with a half-dead woman's modesty. "I don't know you," I whispered, though the words shook. "No," he said simply. "And you don't owe me your story if you don't want to tell it. But you need rest, and you'll have it here, so long as you choose." Choose. Another word I had nearly forgotten the taste of. Choice. My whole life. My choices had been stolen by men by my father, who had married me off for land, and by Harold, who had reduced me to bruises and silence. Now a stranger told me the word as though it had weight again. I turned away. The fire's glow flickering across the bruises blooming on my arms. His eyes had seen them already. He did not speak of them, did not ask. Perhaps that was what eased me most. He did not demand. He offered. The days that followed blurred together. My body ached in places I hadn't known could ache, but the fever never came, thanks to his care. Ethan Walker moved about his cabin with quiet efficiency, chopping wood, mending tools, feeding his stock. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice was steady, grounding, like the low hum of a hymn. He let me help when I insisted, washing dishes, sweeping, stirring a pot of beans over the fire. My hands fumbled. I was no good at such things. Harold had never allowed me to, but Ethan never laughed. He only nodded, as if every small effort of mine was worth something. Sometimes I caught him studying me from the corner of his eye, as though he wondered what had driven me into that storm. And sometimes I wanted to tell him, to spill every ugly truth, to show him the scars beneath my ribs and the nightmares lodged in my skull. But then the fear rose up like bile. If he knew, would he send me back? Would he pity me? Would he, in time, grow tired and cruel as every man did? One evening, as the sun bled out across the desert and painted the walls in gold, he asked softly, "What should I call you?" I hesitated. My name tasted dangerous. "Clara," I said at last. "Nothing more." "Just Clara," he nodded. "Clara, then. No demand for more. No suspicion. Just acceptance." And it nearly undid me. Nights were the hardest. Sleep brought Harold's face, his fists, the weight of him pressing me into silence. I would wake with a strangled cry, sweat soaking my shift, heart pounding. And always, I would find Ethan sitting by the fire, whittling a piece of wood or staring into the flames. He would not come close. He would only say, "It's all right. You're here, not there. Somehow." Those words anchored me enough to breathe again. I began to see the shape of a different life, fragile as it was. A life where a man did not raise his hand when I spoke. A life where I could dig into soil and plant seeds, watch something grow instead of wither. I found myself humming once while sweeping. The sound startled me. I had not heard my own voice in song for years. Ethan looked up from his work, and though he said nothing, the corner of his mouth curved, just slightly, as though that small tune was worth more than gold. In the town of Cedar Bluff, folks began whispering. They saw me by Ethan's side, quiet and pale, and asked questions with their eyes. He told them I was his cousin from back east, come to help for a spell. They accepted it, mostly though. I caught the sheriff's wife, Martha, watching me with a knowing look. She pressed a loaf of bread into my hands one market day and said, "You take care of yourself now." Honey, something in her tone told me she understood more than she let on. But peace was a thin blanket, and the desert winds have a way of tearing such things away. Word traveled fast, faster than I could hide. Harold McCree had money, men, and a pride blacker than the coal seams in his land. He would not forgive. He would not rest. I felt his shadow lengthening, even under the bright sun of Cedar Bluff, even in the quiet safety of Ethan's cabin. And though my heart had begun timidly to hope, I knew the storm was not done with me yet. I had thought the desert had already taken everything from my strength, my courage, my faith. But in the weeks that followed my arrival at Ethan's cabin, I began to see that it had left me something too. A chance. A fragile, trembling chance at life beyond Harold's reach. Each morning I woke with the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee brewing. For a few precious moments I forgot I was hunted. For a few breaths I was only Clara, a woman standing barefoot on wide-planked floors, brushing hair from her face while the sun crept soft and golden through the cracks of a cabin window. But the peace never held for long. It never could. Danger hung on the air like dust. I felt it in the restless twitch of the horses in their stalls, in the sharp glances of townsfolk who whispered when we passed, in the way Ethan's hand hovered near the butt of his revolver. Whenever a stranger rode into Cedar Bluff, Harold's shadow stretched across every horizon. And no matter how many times I told myself he couldn't find me, I knew in my bones he would. The first blow came quiet, like most troubles do. One morning Ethan saddled the bay mare and said he needed to ride into town for supplies. I offered to go with him. Part of me hated being left behind, hated the silence of the cabin when I was alone, but he shook his head. Too many eyes out there. Best you stay where it's safe. He left me with a kiss on the forehead so gentle it made my chest ache. Hours later, he returned not with flour or coffee beans, but with a warning. Harold had sent word. 2 hired guns had been seen asking questions in Cedar Bluff, describing a woman with dark hair and a frightened look. They wanted directions. Nobody had given them. Not yet, but gossip spreads faster than prairie fire. It was only a matter of time before they followed the trail straight to us. I told myself I wouldn't be afraid, that I would not run again. But when night fell, every creak of the cabin, every howl of a coyote outside the door made me flinch. Ethan tried to soothe me. He said, "Fear keeps you sharp, but don't let it rule you, Clara. You've got more fight in you than you think." His faith in me was a heavier burden than my fear. I wanted to live up to it, but I was still the woman who had cowered under Harold's boots. The attack came on the 3rd evening. We were riding back from a neighboring homestead where Ethan had traded for seed. The road was empty, the air thick with dust, when 2 riders emerged from behind a ridge. Their faces were half hidden beneath bandanas, their rifles leveled. My stomach dropped. I recognized the cold gleam in their eyes. Harold's kind of men. Walker, one of them called. "Hand over the lady. Ain't your concern what her husband wants with her?" I had no weapon, no defense, only the terror clawing through my veins. Ethan swung down from his horse slow and steady, as if every movement had been rehearsed. His hand rested on his revolver, and his voice was calm as still water. "She doesn't belong to him. She belongs to no man." The air tightened. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. Then everything broke at once. A shout, the crack of gunfire, the blinding sting of dust as hooves churned the earth. Ethan fired first, his pistol roaring, the blast echoing across the canyon. One man fell, clutching his chest. The other wheeled his horse, firing wild before spurring away in a cloud of grit. My ears rang with the sound. My body trembled so hard I nearly slipped from the saddle. When silence returned, I slid from my horse and stumbled to Ethan's side. He was alive, unscathed, though the dust clung to his face and sweat dripped from his brow. I threw myself into his arms without thinking, burying my face against his shirt. Tears came hot and heavy. "Don't leave me," I begged. "Don't ever leave me." His arms tightened around me, strong and sure. "Never," he said, and I believed him, if only because I had to. But the victory was hollow. One man was dead, yes, but the other had escaped. He would ride back to Harold with the truth. Clara Dawson was alive, living with Ethan Walker. We had bought ourselves days, maybe weeks. No more Ethan buried the body beneath the mesquite trees, his face carved with grim lines. I watched him work, guilt twisting inside me. Because of me, blood soaked the desert. Because of me, Ethan's quiet life of solitude had been shattered. Yet when he caught me staring, he only said, A man chooses his battles. I've chosen mine. He touched my cheek with hands rough and gentle at once, and I'd choose it again. I should have felt comfort. Instead, I felt the weight of doom pressing closer. We returned to town some days later. Walking among neighbors who eyed us curiously, Sheriff Barnes cornered us outside the general store, his voice low. "McCree's back," he said, meaning Harold. "Came in this morning with papers, waving him around like gospel. Claims you're his lawful wife, Clara. Judge is due in a fortnight and he'll want to see you." My stomach dropped. Law was a cruel thing for women like me. To the courts, I was property bound by vows, no matter how bloody they were. If Harold had the papers, what chance did I have? Ethan stiffened beside me. "The law is supposed to protect the innocent," he growled, "not hand them back to a devil." Barnes sighed. "Law and justice ain't always the same, Walker. But I'll do what I can to stall." He tipped his hat and left us there, the weight of his words pressing like stones. That night I couldn't eat. I sat by the fire, my hands trembling in my lap. Ethan knelt before me, his eyes searching mine. "Clara, look at me." I did, though my throat ached with unshed tears. "He can wave papers all he wants, but he doesn't own you. You hear me?" Not anymore, I wanted to believe. I wanted to let those words settle deep and take root, but the fear was stronger. What if the judge rules for him? I whispered. What if the law takes me back? Ethan's jaw tightened. Then the law will have to go through me. The days dragged. I found myself singing softly when I worked, half to steady my nerves, half to remind myself I was still alive. One night, as snow dusted the desert and the fire glowed bright, I sang a hymn my mother once taught me. My voice wavered but held, and when I finished, Ethan was watching me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring. "It was my mother's," he said. "I've been meaning to give it to you, but I didn't want to rush you. Clara, will you marry me?" My breath caught. The firelight made the ring glimmer like hope itself. But my heart was torn in two. I wanted to say yes, to claim the happiness he offered. But Harold still lurked like a vulture. My past wasn't finished with me, and I couldn't bind Ethan to a woman half buried in shadows. Tears filled my eyes. I pressed my lips to his cheek, soft and lingering. "Give me time," I whispered.
Ace?
"I need to be sure I'm not saying yes out of fear." His hand brushed my hair back. And though disappointment flickered in his eyes, he nodded. Time, then. It was the very next day that Harold struck. We were returning from town when riders appeared on the ridge again, two silhouettes against the sun. Gunfire erupted. The air filled with smoke and thunder. Ethan shoved me behind the horses, drawing his revolver with deadly calm. The duel that followed was like something torn from legend. Dust flew, bullets whined past my ears, and I screamed Ethan's name until the world narrowed to the sound of his gun. When the smoke cleared, one man lay dead, the other galloping away, his voice carrying across the desert. "Tell McCree she's his yet?" I rushed to Ethan, clutching him tight, sobbing against his chest. "Don't leave me," I begged again, the words ripped from my soul. He held me, his body trembling with the aftermath of battle. "Never, Clara, never." We knew then that Harold himself would come next, and not alone. Days later, the prophecy fulfilled itself. Harold rode into Cedar Bluff with a judge at his side and a deputy trailing behind. He swaggered into the square, his voice loud enough for every soul to hear. "That woman is my wife, and I'll have her back, lawfully or by force." He pointed at me, his eyes wild, his face twisted with the old rage I knew too well. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked at me with pity, others with doubt. My knees buckled, but Ethan stepped forward, planting himself like a shield. "She is my wife now," he declared. "She is my family, and no man takes her from me." Harold's laughter was ugly. He waved the marriage certificate in the judge's face. "Paper don't lie. She's mine." But as the judge raised a hand to speak, Harold's mask cracked. His rage boiled over. He drew his pistol, right there in front of law and God alike. Gasps swept the crowd. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then Ethan drew faster than I could blink. The duel was brutal and brief. Gunfire shattered the air, smoke curling like the breath of the devil himself. Harold staggered, clutching his chest, eyes wide with disbelief. Blood spilled across the church steps as the spring rain began to fall, washing the dust red. He collapsed, a tyrant undone by his own violence. Silence held the town in its grip until Sheriff Barnes lifted his voice. "Self-defense," he declared. Walker did only what he had to. The crowd erupted in relief. Some cheered, others wept. I fell to my knees beside Ethan, grasping his hand as though it anchored me to the earth. Tears streamed down my face, but they were tears of release, of freedom hard won. For the first time in years, I could breathe without fear of a fist. Weeks later, in that very same church, Ethan and I wed. It was a simple ceremony, no pomp, no chains. The preacher's words spoke not of obedience, but of partnership, of two souls walking side by side. When Ethan slid the silver ring onto my finger, he leaned close and whispered, "I didn't save you, Clara. We saved each other." My heart swelled with a love fierce and tender all at once. This was not survival. This was life at last. The cabin became a home. Laughter returned to its walls, filling the spaces where silence once reigned. I planted a garden, coaxing green from the stubborn desert. Birds nested in the eaves, their songs mingling with mine. Each evening, Ethan and I sat on the porch, hand in hand, watching the sun sink behind the red mountains. The world was still harsh, still unforgiving, but together we faced it unbowed. From the shards of violence, I had found more than freedom. I had found love and a place to belong, and in the hush of twilight, with Ethan's hand warm in mine, I finally understood. Broken as I had been, I was not beyond mending. The desert had not ended me. It had remade me.